Scorpio. This separation was or will be necessary for your growth. You didn't expect to feel it so deeply. No one expects it. No matter how many times life has taught that separations exist, when yours comes, it arrives as if it were the first, as if the body had never learned to deal with this specific type of pain. And for Scorpio, this pain has a different texture. It's not just longing, it's not just absence, it's almost an internal amputation. Because when Scorpio truly connects with someone, with a person, with a phase of life, with a version of themselves, that connection goes deep, it goes to the bone. And when it breaks, what remains is not just any emptiness, it's a hole with a memory. But I need to tell you something that you might not want to hear right now. Something that will hurt in a different way before it makes sense. This separation, whether it has already happened or the one you feel coming or the one you are in the middle of without yet knowing what it is, it was not a mistake of the universe. It was the universe working exactly as it should. And before you close this thinking it's just another cheap comfort speech, stay, because what I'm about to describe isn't self-help talk. It's the real astrological and psychological logic behind why certain breakups are the most necessary thing that can happen in a Scorpio's life. And why was Scorpio specifically chosen to go through this level of disruption? Before continuing, an honest question. When that separation happened, what was your first thought? Not the thought you told people. The real one, the one that stuck. Was it anger? That was the unanswered question. Why me? Was it a kind of relief that you were ashamed to feel? Was it the immediate certainty that you would never be able to get through this? Whatever it was, that thought says more about where you were than about what happened. And understanding where you were is the first step to understanding why the universe needed to do what it did. Because separation in the life of a Scorpio is rarely an accident. It's rarely bad luck. It's rarely simply the result of external circumstances that got out of control. It's almost always the answer. An answer to something that had been asking for change for longer than you admit. An answer to a pattern you'd been repeating without realizing it. An answer to a version of yourself that needed to end so that another could begin. And Pluto, the planet that rules Scorpio, the planet of symbolic death and real rebirth, doesn't send polite warnings. It doesn't knock on the door and ask permission. When Pluto decides the cycle is over, it ends it, sometimes gently, often brutally, but always when necessary, what the separation was trying to say. There's one thing Scorpio does that almost no other sign does with the same consistency. Scorpio sustains. It sustains what isn't working for longer than it should. It sustains relationships that have already shown their true colors. It sustains situations that have drained, diminished, and repeated the same pattern of pain with different characters. And not out of naivete. That needs to be clear. Scorpio isn't naive. You knew. On some level, not always consciously but always present, you knew that something wasn't right, that something was out of place, that the numbers didn't add up, but it remained that way anyway. Do you know why? Because Scorpio has a loyalty that goes beyond logic, an ability to see potential where others have already given up, a refusal to abandon what was once real just because the present is difficult. In many contexts, this is one of the greatest qualities of this sign. In this specific context, that's what delayed the inevitable. The separation that happened or that is coming didn't appear out of nowhere. It was built silently over a period of time that you know how long it is if you stop to think about it. It was built in the moments when you ignored what you felt, in the moments when you rationalized what you should have faced, in the moments when you gave it another chance, not because there was a real reason, but because letting go hurt more than continuing. And the universe waited. It gave space, it gave time. But Pluto has a limited amount of patience for what is dead but not yet buried. And when that limit is reached, separation becomes inevitable, not as punishment, as a conclusion, as the natural end of something that had already fulfilled its purpose. The question that changes everything is not, why did this happen to me? The question that changes everything is, what did this cycle show me that I wasn't seeing? What you lost and what you really lost. Here I need to make a distinction that Scorpio rarely makes on their own in the midst of pain. There's what you've truly lost, and there's what you think you've lost. These are different things, and confusing the two is what keeps Scorpio trapped in a grief that should already be moving forward. What you truly lost has real value. It has substance. It includes moments that truly existed, conversations that were real, connections that were genuine, a sense of belonging that was concrete while it lasted. It existed. It won't exist any less because it's over, and it deserves to be honored for what it was. But what you think you've lost, that's where the labyrinth lies. You are mourning a promise that was not fulfilled, a version of the future that existed only in your head, not as an empty fantasy, but as a real possibility that was invested with energy, with hope, with your specific way of committing that is total when it is true. You're grieving for the version of the relationship you believed was possible, not the one that existed, the one that could have existed if things were different. And that pain, the pain of the possible that didn't become real, that's the hardest to get through, because there's no concrete object, there's no way to show what was lost. Only you know the magnitude of what inhabited the space between what was and what could have been. Scorpios carry this type of grief with an intensity that few can imagine. But there comes a moment, unscheduled, non-linear, but real, when the grief for what was possible needs to be let go, not denied, not erased, but let go, because while you hold on to the future that hasn't happened, you're not fully available for the future that is yet to come. The pattern that separation came to break. Now comes the part that requires honesty. Because every significant separation in a Scorpio's life carries within it a lesson about patterns, a behavior, a belief, a way of relating that was repeating itself with the same person or with different characters, and that needed to be interrupted in some way. And the separation was that interruption. What pattern emerges in your life when you look at this relationship, or the relationship you had with this phase, with this person, with this situation, with an honest eye? Is there a pattern to choosing people who need rescuing and then exhausting oneself trying to rescue them? Is there a pattern to fading away to maintain peace and then silently accumulating until the breaking point? Is there a pattern to attracting intensity because calm seems suspicious? Is there a pattern to giving complete access to those who haven't proven they deserve it and then shutting down completely when trust is broken? Scorpio has patterns. Every sign does. But Scorpio's patterns are harder to see because they're hidden beneath an emotional intelligence that knows how to accurately identify patterns in others and sometimes has blind spots regarding their own. The separation came to illuminate this blind spot, not to punish you, not because the universe has an interest in seeing you suffer, but because sometimes it's only when something is taken away, abruptly, painfully, in a way that can't be ignored, that a person stops and truly looks. And Scorpio, when they stop and truly look inward without filters, has an extraordinary ability to see. The problem is that Scorpios rarely stop. It keeps moving. It keeps processing externally. It continues with a full schedule, with the next step planned, with the armor adjusted, with the posture that it's already okay when it's not yet. This separation is asking you to stop. Not that you fall apart, not that you collapse, but that you stop long enough to look at what has become visible now that what was in front of you is gone. What grows in the space that separation opens up? There's something that Scorpio knows intellectually but sometimes forgets to feel. Real growth doesn't happen in comfortable continuity. It happens at the rupture, at the discontinuity, at the moment when the ground shifts and you need to find balance on unfamiliar terrain. Scorpio was made for this terrain, literally, symbolically, astrologically. The symbol of Scorpio is not a creature of the surface. It is a being that lives in the deepest layers, one that knows the darkness, that survives in environments that would kill others, that carries within itself both the poison and the antidote. And the phoenix, the highest symbol of this sign, is not reborn from a tranquil life. It is reborn from the ashes, from what has burned completely. This isn't pretty poetry. It's a literal description of the Scorpion's growth process. Every significant breakup you've been through, look back now and confirm it, created a space that over time was filled with something more genuine than what was there before. A more whole version of yourself. A clarity that didn't exist before the rupture. A capacity that was developed precisely because the situation demanded it. It wasn't quick, it wasn't painless, but it was real. And this current separation, the one that hurts now, the one that still lacks a clear resolution, the one that is still raw, it also has that potential. The question is, what will grow in the space she created? This is not a rhetorical question, it's literal, it's the most important question you can ask yourself right now. Because the answer isn't in the past, it's in what you decide to do with the space that has been created. The part that Scorpions resist the most. The time has come to talk about what Scorpio rarely admits out loud. The hardest part of a breakup for this sign isn't the acute pain. It's not the immediate period when everything is still in shock and the system is processing what happened. The hardest part comes later, when life returns to a semblance of normalcy, when the people around you have already assumed you're okay, when the situation is no longer an issue, and you inside are still processing it. He's still filing it, he's still revisiting it. He's still at 3 in the morning going over the conversations, the moments, the choices, asking himself what could have been different, finding the exact points where the course could have changed. This isn't pathological rumination, it's Scorpio being Scorpio. Long-term memory, deep analysis, a refusal to accept superficial answers about what happened. These are characteristics that in most contexts are strengths. In this context, they can become a cage, because there comes a point where the analysis has already given all it had to give, where you already know everything there is to know, where continuing to revisit it isn't producing insight, it's producing wear and tear. And recognizing that point and stopping is one of the bravest things a Scorpio can do. Not because failing to analyze is a weakness, but because insisting on finding answers where there are no more answers to be found is a way of not accepting that some things simply were. No complete explanation, no perfect resolution, without the closure that the Scorpio mind so desperately needs. Sometimes closure doesn't come from the outside. It doesn't come from the other person. It doesn't come from fully understanding what happened. It comes down to you deciding that what's done is done, and that you will move on with what you have left, not with what you lost. On forgiveness, the real version, not the nice version. Let's talk about forgiveness because it will come up in this process and needs to be addressed honestly. Not with that version of forgiveness that the world sells, light, quick, almost cosmetic. The version of I forgive and release said in 5 words, as if a wound of years could dissolve in a single sentence. Scorpio doesn't operate that way, and it doesn't need to operate that way. For this sign, true forgiveness is a process. It's a series of decisions made repeatedly over time. It's not a single event, it's a practice. It's about waking up one day and choosing not to let that anger govern today's decisions and making the same choice the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. Even on the days when the anger returns with force, even on the days when all you feel is the injustice of what happened. Forgiveness in Scorpio is not the absence of anger. It is the decision not to be driven by it. And there's an aspect of forgiveness that is rarely mentioned, self-forgiveness. For staying longer than she should have, for ignoring her feelings, for giving chances that in hindsight went against her own logic, for choosing to sustain what had already proven unsustainable. This self-forgiveness is the most difficult, and it is the most necessary, because as long as you carry guilt or shame from your own past choices, you are not completely free to make new choices with the clarity you have now. And you have more clarity now than you did before this separation. It might hurt too much to feel it today, but it's true, what the universe was expecting you to realize. There is one specific thing that significant separations reveal about Scorpio. They reveal where the investment that shouldn't have been there was, where the energy was being directed consciously or not to sustain something that had already run its course. And with that energy returning, because when something ends, the energy that was there returns, even if it takes time, what are you going to do with it? This is the question the universe is waiting for, not as a test, as an opening, as an invitation to now direct, with everything you know that you didn't know before, your attention, your emotional investment, your capacity for commitment, which is enormous. Even if you doubt it after getting hurt, towards what truly deserves it, for what is already in your life but hasn't received the attention it deserves, because that attention is elsewhere, for what you are building yourself, for the version of yourself that was waiting for space to exist. Scorpio, after a significant separation, is no longer the same Scorpio as before. It can't be. Pluto's process doesn't leave a person untouched. It's not possible to go through that kind of rupture, real, profound, that went all the way to the bone and come out the same on the other side. You will come out changed. The question is, changed in what direction? More closed-minded or more selective? There's a huge difference between the two. More distrustful or more discerning. They're not the same thing either. More alone out of fear, or more whole because he has learned where his energy belongs. A Scorpio who goes through a breakup and completely shuts down is using the process backwards. They are letting the pain build walls where they should be building discernment. And a Scorpio who goes through a separation and emerges with real discernment, with clarity about what will and will not be given access to, with criteria more aligned with who they really are, with less tolerance for what drains and more presence for what nourishes, that Scorpio is operating exactly as Pluto intended. One thing no one told you about this separation. This separation didn't happen because you're not enough. This sentence needs to land. Because what the Scorpio mind does, especially in the quieter layers, the ones that don't come up in conversation with anyone, is to construct a narrative of inadequacy. A story that if you were different, if you had acted differently, if you were lighter or less intense or easier to love or less complicated, things would have been fine. But that narrative is false. The separation didn't happen because you're too much. It happened because what was there wasn't capable of receiving who you truly are. The intensity, the depth, the total loyalty, the demand for authenticity that Scorpio unconsciously places on everything. Being who you are is not a flaw. It is precisely who you are that will find what is on the right frequency for it, that will build what has enough substance to withstand the real weight of your inner world, that will create what can last precisely because it is not made of compromise, it is made of truth. But to do that, you need to get through this first, completely. No shortcuts, no skipping the painful parts. Scorpio knows how to cross. It has crossed before, it will cross again. The difference this time, if you let it, is that you'll go through it more consciously, more present with the process, more honest about what you're feeling, instead of managing the pain from afar as if it were someone else's. This changes what remains afterward. On the other side of this, I don't know exactly where you are in this process right now. Maybe the breakup just happened and you're still in shock. Maybe it's been months and you're in that strange state of, I feel okay, but I'm not sure. Maybe you feel it's coming, this breakup that hasn't happened yet, but that you perceive as inevitable on your radar that never lies. Regardless of where you are in the process, what I'm going to say now is the same. On the other side of that, something real is waiting. Not a vague promise, not a comforting everything will be all right, but something concrete, a version of yourself that only exists after going through this kind of ordeal. A lighter version of things that weren't yours, with more space for what is, with clearer criteria, with a kind of openness that didn't exist before, not because you became more naive, but because you became more whole. Scorpio, after going through a real breakup, one that goes deep, doesn't run away, and looks at what needs to be looked at, has a quality of presence that is difficult to describe. It's the quality of someone who knows they've already survived what they thought they wouldn't survive. That which is within its body, the memory of traversing the darkness and finding a way out. That there's no need to pretend there's no darkness anymore. This cannot be bought. It cannot be learned from a book. It only comes from within an experience that demanded everything from you. And this separation, however painful it may be now, is one of those experiences. The universe didn't spare you from it because you're strong enough to get through it. And because what comes after it, the version of you that is born from it, is what needs to exist for the next cycle that is to come. If you're going through a breakup right now and this video came at the right time, right below, you don't need to explain everything. One word says it all. And if you know a Scorpio who's going through a difficult time, send this to them. Sometimes the most necessary thing is someone naming what we haven't yet been able to name on our own.